Hey, it's great to be joining you today at this Momentum Global Conference, wherever you're connecting in from. If I've not met you before, my name is Dave Thomas, and I have got our senior pastor of Freedom Church, Pastor Gary Snowsall, here with me today. And we're going to be having a conversation about some of the attributes that you're going to need in business. If you've not met Pastor G before, not only are he and Heather the senior pastor of our church for the last 30 years plus, but you've actually been in business for pretty much that whole time. And we're going to be talking about an attribute that's very dear to us as part of our DNA, punching above your weight. Because if we're going to be successful in business, we're going to need that boldness, that audacity to punch above our weight. And so, G, just kicking straight off, I know this is something that you live out yourself, but in a business sense, tell us a story of where this has been a reality for you in your journey.
Yeah, well, I can talk about business, stuff that went on, but I'm going to start by talking about an auction I went to.
Oh, come on.
So this wasn't really to do with the business.
Right.
In fact, I was going to the auction to look at buying some land for the church.
Oh,
because even at the time, the church had some money, and
Yep.
we just believed in investing in it at the time to create some finance. So again, great business.
Come on.
Use your talents,
Yep.
whatever. So I went to this auction to go and see what it would go for, and I was ready to bid, but the land just shot through the ceiling. It was above the budget, so I just stayed at the auction.
Right.
And as I was there, another property came up sort of on the screen, and I recognized this property. It was in a little village just 2 miles from
Right.
where we lived at the time, and it was an old dilapidated barn, 400 years old.
Wow.
And this barn, I looked at it because I was interested in it, and even maybe for the church we could do a development.
Right.
But I was warned off it. I was said, whatever you do, don't touch it. This thing had it had brick walls like this, and the whole thing was falling over.
Oh my goodness.
And it was a huge project. And I got someone in who was an experienced developer builder, and he said, don't touch it with a barge pole. He said, you need an open check for this.
Oh
So
my
obviously I
goodness.
couldn't risk church's money in investment with that.
Yeah.
So I was there, and this property came up. So I thought, I've looked at this. Obviously not interested, but I'll stay. So as I was there watching, the bids started going. And as the bids were going, they seemed to be quite slow. And I was thinking, I can't believe that it's not higher. This is worth a lot more than this. Right. And it sort of, it really was going quite slow. And the room was full of people. And so I don't know what came over me, Dave. I wasn't thinking of a church. I was thinking this would be a great project. It'd be a great home for me.
on.
Now at this point, we'd built 2 houses before.
Right.
And I'd almost taught myself how to manage and build houses. And so from it, I just thought, well, I've never done a barn conversion. And I thought I've been told not to go for it, and didn't even have the money for it. But I just thought, hey, I'm here at the auction. Something happened. I don't know, it came at the back of my head. Something came at the back of my head, said something to my brain, put your hand up. So when they were bidding,
Oh my goodness.
my hand went up, and the auctioneer said, I see that bid, I see that bid. And anyway, I thought, look, it's so low, I'm going to be fine because, there's lots of people in the room. So I put one bid in, right? It was £150,000. I put one bid in, and the guide was 250. So I thought, it's not going to sell. So I put my hand up, and I thought, I don't know why I'm doing this, but I'm here, doing this for myself. And then as I did it, everyone stopped. It was like the room went silent. And I was thinking, please, someone. And then he kept saying, right, go in once, go in twice. Got fresh blood in the room, fresh blood. I thought, man, there's going to be some blood in the room. And here we are, right? So on the third one, the hammer went down. He said, sold to me.
Oh my goodness.
I didn't even have the money for the deposit.
What?
And here it's like a legal thing. So you're bound for 10%.
It is.
So I went up and gave him a check for 15. Well, this is what happened, first of all. I thought, there's no way, there's always a reserve. And he said to me, you won't believe it. He said, but this morning, he said the reserve was 200,000. So you wouldn't have bought it. But this morning, the client was so worried it was going to fall down. He said he lowered it to 150, the exact figure you bought it for. He said, it's yours. And I'm there thinking, oh my goodness. So I wrote a check without any money in the account.
Oh my goodness.
I gave it, and back then it's like, say, 3 days for a check to clear. So I went away thinking I've got to find and borrow 15,000 from somewhere, let alone the rest of the money. Then I had to go home, and this was the worst thing. I had to go home and then tell Heather, my wife, what I've done. So I said, you better sit down. And we built this other house. She was quite happy there. And then and I said, I did something today. Something happened. She said, what have you done? I went to an auction and I bought a barn. And do you know what she did? She cried. What have you done? What have you done?
Oh,
so
my
anyway,
goodness.
we worked that through, we worked that through. And then I managed to loan the money, went on this loan in the money for the deposit. Then I had 28 days to find the rest of the money.
Oh my goodness.
And obviously, normally back then, the banks wouldn't help you, whatever.
Yeah.
But on the I tried all these different options. On the 27th day, I had a contact it was just an exceptional contact and favor where this bank turned around and said, we'll give you the money.
Wow.
And I completed on the place, bought it. Then I went on a process of 2 years of restoring it. That's how long and complex it was.
Wow.
And God provided all the way through. We went on this incredible journey, moved in. That's where we live right now. Wow. But it has been a blessing to us, and we could not have dreamt of how that could happen. And I look back now, and I wouldn't recommend this to everyone. I mean, I don't know. I just felt like God was in that situation. But I think that was an example of maybe punching above our weight.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is now your sort of current home. You've been living there for the last 10, 15
13 years.
Or 13 years. And it's a wonderful, wonderful home. And it's not only an amazing home for you and your family, but it's a place that you've done ministry, a place you've seen lives transformed. And I know certainly when I go in there, I think it's a fantastic place. But it started with this moment of boldness, this moment of willingness to take a bet on something that other people wouldn't. And we're talking about business, or we're talking about entrepreneurialism, and the attitudes that we need, and the kind of way that we need to, the things that we need to develop in order to see success. What are some of those attitudes that you would be saying people need to grow and need to develop in their lives?
Yeah, one of the first things I've learned in business is simply give it a go.
Come on.
You're not always confident what you're doing.
Right.
The amount of times I've been in a situation and I've blagged it.
Just like that one. Come on.
It's like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I just know there's something about, I think part of this pioneering, because entrepreneurs, they know how to pioneer. You're going to break new ground. You're going to do something maybe someone else hasn't done. Yeah. And you've got to give it a go, because you're not always going to know. And I see a lot of people standing back trying to work out and calculate all the, is this going to be a total success? Is it, there's no chance of failure? Yeah. Sorry, it doesn't work that way. There's always this chance of failure within what you do, but give it a go. And I think I've learned not to be afraid of giving it a go.
Come on.
I can learn these things. And so many people say, but I don't know how to. No, you can learn. And I think there is this attitude to say, okay, I'm not sure how, but I can learn. And if you get thrown in the deep end, you either sink or you swim. And it's a way of learning how to swim. Right. And I think there's something in that, but also through it, I think it's really having an attitude of resilience. You're going to need resilience. Yeah. If you get disheartened, discouraged, and they said no to me, and this didn't happen, and I had this great idea of doing my business, but I was, it was a struggle, so I gave up. Yeah. You'll have a resilience to sort of keep coming back. I'm going to keep giving it a go and developing a reservoir of determination. Wow. You've got to have this determination. That only comes through the hard knocks, through struggles, and handling them well. Right. Rather than giving up. Yeah, so good. On that first point you made about giving it a go, obviously there's going to be a number of people who are here or doing Momentum this year who haven't started their businesses, but they've got business ideas. When it comes to giving something a go, what sort of percentage do you say, if you think 50-50 this could work, I'm in, or even if it's 70-30 or 30-70, what's your kind of, when you're looking at opportunity, what's the kind of the boundaries at which you would walk away from it or give it a go? Yeah, I often rely on my gut feeling. Right. Because even when I bought the barn, there was no 50-50. It's impossible to work it out. It was impossible. And I think those situations are more unique. Yeah. You need to have a lot of wisdom. I mean, was there wisdom? I don't think there probably was, but there was something in me that I think I had this conviction in me and this gut feeling. That's how I describe it. And I felt God was in that. Yeah. God wanted to bless us through it. And sorry, it wasn't the first time you'd taken a step like that. Like even with houses, you're on your third one at this point. So it wasn't like you completely beginner at that stage. Yeah. It was still a big audacious step. But and each of those steps, as in the first house we built, the smallest house that we built, it was such a stretch for us. We thought it would be impossible. Yeah. But again, God just gave us these signs of saying, do you know what? You could do this. And I thought, I don't know how to build a house. He says, yeah, but you can learn. And so there was these first steps, and we had to struggle to get the finance. You know, the first time I built a house, I hit a riverbed and the river came up through the footings, and it used up all the surplus like cash that we had.
Wow.
And it was like, is this the beginning? And that's what I'm saying about this resilience, this attitude to say, sometimes you won't know. Now, if you've got a great business plan and it's a sure thing, you might be, hey, this is a no-brainer. It's like, you know, I'm sort of 80%, this is going to work, then good for you.
Yeah.
But my experience has been actually a lot of the time taking the risk, speculating to accumulate. Yeah. It's like, okay, this could go wrong, but I'm going to give it a go, and I'm going to, you know, look at, and use wisdom in the best way possible. Gather the knowledge, the preparation you need to jump into it. Ask people. That's how I learned. I just asked people I knew, developers, builders. I got alongside people that had done it already, and that's how I learned.
Yeah, and I think, you know, when you're talking about resilience, it's ultimately not every door swings wide on the journey, does it? And sometimes, particularly as Christians, we can almost expect the favor of the Lord, but actually, I know you've said to me before, often the path that's been the one God has led you down has had the most closed doors, not so much the open doors. But you've got to learn to kick them down, overcome them, all those kind of things. And I know that you've discovered that. And all of this speaks to this culture point, this DNA we have of punching above our weight, because ultimately, punching above your weight is looking at an insurmountable task and giving it a go. And we see throughout the Bible, so many of the biblical heroes that we have, they had this running within them. And that's what a lot of our entrepreneurs and business leaders are going to need to develop. So how do you develop that part of you that will punch above your weight?
I think so much of it is leading yourself. I call it self-leadership. Is at the end of the day, I could blame situations on, well, the market went down, you know, it wasn't very good for the business, this happened, COVID happened.
Yes.
It's like, you know, there's so many things. You've got to have this adaptability to be able to adapt. Right. And I started 5 businesses altogether. Right. Only 2 of them were profitable. Wow. But what I did is they were stepping stones to the one that became more successful. Right. So I think it's like learning to be adaptable and learn, like self-lead. So I realized, actually, I did that wrong. Perhaps I could do that better. Next time, some of the planning and preparation, I just wish I knew more. And that's what I love about Momentum, is that there are people who have experience, and maybe about setting up business. I wish I'd set my business up differently at the beginning, because I paid a price for it later through tax and other stuff. And I just think if you can get more advice, you can get alongside people who are going to really give you like impartial advice that are going to help you. And I think all of that is like being open to it. I love the fact Momentum does that it's almost giving support, giving input, learning from others' experience. I had to learn from my own. And from it, as I journeyed, I just started to lead myself in it, not to blame others or have entitlement around, well, you know, I did this and I'm disappointed. I thought, no, okay, there must be another way. This hasn't worked. There's got to be another way. Yeah, I love that. That's how I did it.
Yeah, and what I love about even the language of punching above your weight, it speaks of a boxer, doesn't it? And at the end of the day, a boxer that doesn't have that self-discipline is never going to get anywhere. But equally, if they don't have a coach, they don't have somebody in their corner calling them up and bringing that wisdom. And obviously, you know, we can look at that within the people around us, but it primarily comes from God. And I just quickly want to touch on this, because all these audacious steps in this growing, it's actually been a big part of your own journey of faith, hasn't it? And your knowing of God, because we live in a world right now that often we can develop this expectation that God just wants to give to us and it's going to be easy and he's just going to fling wide all those doors, and we get confused about the character of God. But you've actually met him and grown in your relationship with him through the resistance as much as through the open doors that you've experienced as well, haven't you?
Yeah, you said it earlier about some of the doors that I had to go through. Most I had to kick them down. They weren't just, here's an open door. Right. I had to pursue it. I had to step out and try and find the door that would open by pushing it. Yeah. And that developed, I think, within me this sort of, I think, tenacity to say, I'm not just going to give up at the first point. Right. Sometimes it was the third, the fourth, and it was developing something within me. I also noticed that over the years, when I look back, God often presented great opportunities through people. You know, where, like the one time someone came to me, he was a customer, and he just said, do you want to buy some land? I didn't even ask him. Wow. He said, it's a plot. And I said, is it up for sale? No, not publicly, but I like you and I want to sell it to you. Wow. I didn't have the money, but this was our second house. And it was the worst possible time because we were struggling in the business. everything said, don't do it.
Yeah.
But then I had this plot opportunity, and God said, are you going to push through to this?
Wow.
And I'm thinking, God, but I'm going to take on so much pressure. He says, no, I want to develop your capacity.
Come on.
How do I do that? By presenting opportunity in a place of pressure.
That's so good.
And so sometimes business, that happens. It's like, this is the worst possible time, but maybe it's going to develop something in you.
Come on, that's fantastic. I think it's such an important thing. We've got to realize if we want to develop this aspect of punching above our weight, is we've got to realize is that God is interested in that because it is going to develop your character. There's parts of developing our character that we literally can't work on outside of these stretch moments. And obviously one of the biggest things, it's easy to punch above your weight when you're winning. You know, it's easy to punch above, won that round, got that, miracle. Ultimately, this really counts in those stretch. It really counts in those moments of failure. And there are going to be people doing momentum that have stepped out and it hasn't worked out. How do you keep that attribute, that DNA, that aspect of punching above your weight in the face of failing, in the face of it not going right?
Yeah, one of the first things I learned was it wasn't about me being a failure.
Right.
Because that's when things go wrong. That's the temptation is.
That's huge.
I'm a failure. I'm no good at this. No, maybe the way you did the business was not the best way. Maybe the circumstances that happened that you were in and the challenges you had. On one of my businesses, someone went bankrupt, owed me so much money, it basically threw me into a terrible place. I had to come to a realization. I couldn't prevent that.
Right.
And it wasn't me that was a failure through it,
Yeah.
because it impacted our family at the time.
Yeah.
And I had to walk through that saying, no, I'm not a failure.
Come
and
on.
I think
But
you've still got to look and learn and say, actually, next time I won't trust someone in the way I set that franchise up, the way I set that agreement up. I'm going to be more wise and I'm going to learn from it. So you don't just go out and do the same thing you've always done. You've got to look at doing things differently.
Yeah.
And so I had 5 businesses I started, and you've got to also sometimes look at the business after you've given it a good shot, but also be quick to say, maybe I need to quit this.
Right.
Because there's something more profitable.
Yeah.
That's why we're doing some of this. There's something more beneficial. Sometimes you have got to walk away.
Yeah.
So you need to have wisdom over that. And I did. There were times when I shut the door and said, I've given a few years to this, but I've got something more profitable to walk into, but I'm going to have to learn from that to walk into it.
One of the first messages I ever heard you preach, this is going about 14 years ago when we joined the church, was you talked about strategic quitting. And then the more I got to know you, I was like, I can't believe that was something you preach, because you live with this audaciousness and you kick down doors, and the 3rd, 4th, 5th time you keep going. But there is also that switch in you to know when's enough is enough with it. And I think that's such a key thing. And maybe even there's people here today that God has called you to business. He has called you to be an entrepreneur, but maybe the avenue you're going down, you need to almost really, today is a day where God's putting up the flags.
Yeah. I think it's having the courage to look at it sometimes.
Right.
Because there's nothing worse than you want to delay it week on week, month on month, and things are going this way and you're getting more into debt, and you've got issues with the bank. You've got to confront it. You've got to have a plan. You can't avoid it, because looking at it can make you feel very down and negative and a failure. But if you allow it to go too far without a plan, you end up in a hole. And that's why I would encourage people to say either come up with another plan or look at it. Sometimes there's time to quit. And every time you do have a failure, what I learned was you can use your failure. All it is a lesson.
Right.
Failure is a lesson.
Powerful.
And when you fail, make sure you always fall forward. There was always something about, I'm going to use this, and even if I fail in this, I'm going to use it to throw me forward and learn from it.
Yeah.
And that's how I went on into the next business.
Come on, that's so good. And, as we sort of wrap up our conversation, we head into the rest of our day. We're talking, I guess, here of the balance between this audacious boldness. I'm going to put my hand up in the middle of the auction and buy the thing that I've been told to be wary of, mixed in with this shrewd wisdom of learning from your mistakes. How do we strike the balance between those two things? What would be something you'd say to people today in order to establish that?
I think you've got to calculate the risk involved.
Right.
Because if you're not willing to pay what you put on the table, and if you are going to put a lot up front, and you're going to lose through it,
right?
If that's going to rob your joy and affect your relationships, You shouldn't even be doing it.
Wow.
And so often I'm talking to people who say, hey, I'm going to put 10,000 into this. And I'll say, do you know what? You could lose that. Are you prepared?
Right.
Can you find a way of going forward that is not going to sink you and stop you?
Wow.
And I think there's something generally about calculated risk. Okay, I might make a loss through this, but if I can learn through it and use it, hey, maybe I can make that back and double that, in the future. But you've got to always be prepared that you're not always going to win. You've got to manage your expectations and say, maybe we're going to lose.
Right.
But you've got to see, how am I going to move forward through that failure, through that decision? And if I can't bankroll that, as in within me as a character and as a person, if it comes perhaps in between our marriage, or the kids know, my family know that I'm depressed and I'm struggling because I took on this big loan and I took on this to venture the business forward, and now it's affecting our family, it's not worth it.
Wow.
I think you have to really know what is worth. You've got to make sure you're in control of the business and the business doesn't end up in control of you.
Wow.
And how you go out, robbing your joy, robbing your family, these are the things that matter. And I believe in kingdom business. I believe God wants to bless entrepreneurs, bless business ideas. But you have got to calculate the risks, manage your expectations. And even if there's a loss, you're in agreement with it together. And if you're married, you agree with it together. Now, I did buy the barn without asking Heather. That was a one-off, unique situation. I wouldn't recommend it. You need to be in this together. And as you move forward in this, I think there's something about realizing there's more in you than what you think.
Come on.
It is amazing. And that's punching above your weight.
Yeah,
I would say for so many people that are listening today, there's more potential in you. And this is where we get LFD, live full, die empty.
Come on.
There's more potential in you than you realize. You can actually do more than you are aware of.
Come on.
But you've got to calculate the risk, manage your expectations,
So good.
learn from what you go through. And do you know what? I believe God's looking for people within business, kingdom-minded people who can be a blessing to others, but that he can put wealth into their hands to make a difference.
So good. Man, it's just so powerful, everything you're saying there. I love the phrase you used about you've got to bankroll the risk, not just financially, but your character, your capacity, your mindset. I think many of us, we don't tend to think about bankrolling those elements, but often those things can be where the cost is the most realistic. So today, guys, I think there's so much in this conversation would encourage you to respond and to think through what God is saying to you in this moment. But G, just final thoughts for everybody today on this as we close out our chat.
Yeah, well, when I started out in business, I never realized the journey I was on. I didn't realize the potential that God had placed within me to create wealth, to create money. And I want to encourage you. There is so much potential in every one of you. And God is looking for people who are going to say, I want a kingdom business. I want to put the kingdom first. But God wants to put that wealth into your hands as you go forward into what's next, so that you can be a blessing to others. God has done like an incredible thing through our family, through us, by helping us be a resource to the church. And I believe he's doing that with many of you today, that's his plan. So I want to encourage you today, all of you within Momentum, thanks for coming to this day. I believe it's going to resource you and equip you, but be encouraged. There are great things ahead for every one of you.